I don't have a talking parrot named Lolita, and I don't have a jungle growing in my backyard, but I do have a dragon named Chili, and I have some houseplants. So, let's talk Foolish Heroines. Hello and welcome back. This week I'm very excited because I'm taking part in yet another book tour. Thank you to Isabel Kenyon for reaching out and thinking of me. This time it's in association with Valley Press, who has been helping promote June Wentland's book, Foolish Heroines. It's super engaging, you guys. I flew through it in just a handful of days. It's very engaging, but it's kind of peculiar. It's not like most books that I read. I'd say generally speaking, I read a lot of historical fiction, a lot of contemporary fiction, as I'm sure y'all have gathered if you've been around this channel for a while. And this is contemporary fiction, and I don't know if this is quite the right genre label per se, but I would say that it's somewhere in the realm of like surrealism or magical realism, just in the sense that there are definitely parts of this book that are very realistic, very just like day-to-day pedestrian like telling of people's lives, but then it's like with a twist. So we start out with like right off the bat with this notion, because Janina, who is not in the happiest of marriages, I'd say she's kind of a little bit bored housewife, but she's super duper smart. She's a translator. It starts off saying that she knew that her husband wasn't really there because her hand passed through his arm. I was like, is she a ghost? Is this a metaphor? Is she dreaming? And there are dreams and there are ghosts, but we'll get to that in a minute. But for all intents and purposes, it's just what it is. It's just accurate. And then later, there's another character, Lily, and this is kind of where Lolita, aka Chili, and the magical forest jungle thing comes in. She too is kind of that unhappy housewife, and then her husband dies, and suddenly being on her own for the first time in like 40 years or something, she decides to go to the seaside. She gets her palm read, and she's into the world of astrology and palmistry and all sorts of stuff, which then comes up again later when another character, Shaz, is talking to this co-worker slash boss dude of hers, and she's like, hey, you stole my ideas, and he's like, oh my bad, I was astral projecting, I must have remembered the ideas that we discussed in our conversation but not realize where they come from. And so there are like all of these bits and pieces of this kind of supernatural surreal world that exist within the reality that Wentland creates, and it's just so beautifully done. I mean, even just the plants in Lily's garden. At first, I didn't really realize the extent of the forest, because it talks about how the house's architecture changes and how years and years and years previously, some dude was like really into hot houses, built one, planted a bunch of tropical plants, and then someone, probably the city planner, was like, nope, this is not allowed. And while the hot house was torn down, I guess all the plant life was just kind of like smushed under the new houses and the new developments. And so initially I thought it was kind of just an example of like Mother Nature reclaiming her space, because Lily, the character, wasn't like actively maintaining her garden. But then it evolved into so much more than that, because eventually Janina and Shaz are walking into a park, and suddenly they wander into Janina's back garden. I'm trying not to give away too much, and I realized that I just gave away a lot of minor plot points that probably seem like a bunch of non sequiturs, so please bear with me. But it's just an incredibly nuanced story. It's so layered. I kind of felt like, you know, all those memes of the conspiracy theorist, and it's Charlie from Always Sunny, and he's like with that board. That's how I felt, because I was like, oh my gosh, she's the person from the ad that she's reading, and this is the person that he's talking to. And like everyone is so interconnected and they don't know it. And so that dramatic irony was really fun, and it's just so interesting. Yeah, I love the characters. I wanted to be best friends with them. Like Lily, I think the fact that she gets into this kind of supernatural world is really interesting. I actually read an article about how in COVID, a lot of people are turning to astronomy, or sorry, not astronomy, astrology and palmistry and tarot because they want sense in this chaotic world. And I feel like that was really well embodied by Lily. Not that I think Wentland went out to prove that point, but that she captured an experience that I feel like so many of us have had in such a beautiful way, and kind of in an unexpected way. And then with Janina and her husband Owen, I love that Owen is so stereotypically like male. Like he's the husband who cares for his family, but he's the golfer dad, except for him it's rock climbing and mountain climbing. And so like he's just kind of not there, and he tries, but he kind of half-asses his attempts. So then to some degree he's like, well, what's even the point? And Janina so clearly wants him to put in the effort, but she doesn't know how to communicate to that to him. And so to see his character development where he goes from kind of oblivious to aware but confused and conflicted to genuinely making an effort, and his attempt to win Janina back at the end, it warmed my little nerdy love language heart, because it was so sweet. And I loved that Wentland gave him the opportunity to kind of have that redemption, because unlike some of the other males in the story, like Lily's husband Owen, he never got that redemption because he was just kind of always a sourpuss. And same with Fatima, who is a flower shop, and she's actually one of the first people to like make a connection with one of the other characters. Her husband, he just continues to be oblivious. And so it was really nice to see that there is hope and that there are partnerships like Janina and Owen's where it seems like it's kind of destined for failure, but then they're able to turn it around. Yeah, it seemed like a very real story in the sense that it's about real people living their real lives, but amazing, coincidental, unique things happen. And I love the kind of underlying discussions of philosophy and like pseudo-feminism. I don't know if Wentland was outrightly going for like a feminist lens on this. I could see where it could definitely be interpreted as one, because there's like definitely an element of like sisterhood. And when they decide to make a change in the world, the first person that they try to change is a man, so that he's like more inclusive. Like Shaz is actually an equality officer, and so I think that was kind of supposed to be a theme, but it's a little bit unclear because it's not like a slap in your face bra burning feminism. It was just kind of like a subtle reclaiming your power, reaffirming your worth type of thing. But yeah, all of these philosophical social discussions are being had. Like there's a recurring dream a character has about Leninism and socialism, and can someone's views change after 100 years of being dead? And it was just all very unique. And I liked that it wasn't pushy. I liked that it wasn't forcing the reader to consider those ideas. If you wanted to, you certainly could. I'm sure you could fall down the rabbit hole of like, what's this idea? What's that idea? And I liked the idea, or rather the conversation around relationships. In the conversation that goes back to the title, the female characters are all sitting in Lily's forest home, and they're talking about how in literature, a lot of the foolish heroines choose terrible relationships as they're reflecting on their own relationships. But then I really like how they spin it to, yeah, maybe they're not the brightest for picking the bad guy, looking at you, Wickham, but it allows them to make mistakes, and it allows them to experience things, which then kind of reminds me of the conversation around no spoons, one spoon, and two spoon, who are amnesiacs, because they don't remember who they are and they find themselves in Lily's house. and they get to experience like eating fruit for the first time or drinking tea for the first time, and like really being able to experience it, because I'm sure most of us don't remember the first time that we had tea with 1 spoon of sugar versus 2 spoons of sugar versus no spoons. And so it's a very interesting book because it's very nuanced, it's very multi-layered and multifaceted, and it is a little bit hard at times to keep track of who's who and how they relate to each other. But there are so many very interesting conversations and ideas discussed in the book, and it's done in a really artful way that doesn't seem overwhelming. And so it's just very engaging and enjoyable. And I think you should read it. If lots of characters, lots of ideas and themes are a little overwhelming for you, this might be kind of a dense read. I can't think of any reason in particular why you would not want to read it. So yeah, thank you so much to Isabel Kenyon and Valley Press for introducing me to this wonderfully thoughtful and inquisitive author that is June Wentland, because I loved every minute of it. Like I said, I flew through it in just a couple of days. So that's all I have for the blog tour. You can also access the written blog below. Next week, I will be reading Serena Kent's Death in Provence. I just love the colors. So we'll see how that goes. In the meantime, happy reading and thanks.